Steve Jobs has that great commencement speech where he talks about like everything you see around you, this computer, this house, it was built by somebody no smarter than you. Building this company has really taught me that more is possible and more is accessible than I ever thought in my life. So it's been an enormous lesson that way. And something I'd say to people is if you think of something you can do, you can probably do it.
And welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast. Today we're joined by another badass. We always are surrounded by the best of the best. On the show, Kirsten Liston, who is the CEO and founder of one of the best compliance training companies out there, Rethink Compliance. We highly recommend you go check them out. But in the meantime, the same question that we ask our guest, Kirsten, is tell us what got you to Rethink. And if you want to, just tell us about your entire life.
Yeah, I know. I was actually thinking when you were asking that question, how far do I go back? But I'll do it in an efficient way. So the whole podcast isn't just my origin story. But I was an English major in college, trying to decide between writing and business because writing was my superpower, but business was my interest. I spent about 5 years in the very last pre-internet days of the newspaper industry, kind of coming up in journalism. And I got about 5 years in and I thought, why does journalism feel so depressing? And I didn't know the answer, which is internet was taking all the ad revenue. But I thought, I want to do something else. And so anyway, I found myself through just a college connection. Well, I knew two things. I wanted to live in Boston. And I wanted my job to have writing at the center of it. And I wanted writing to be important to the business. The thing I said to myself at the time was, I don't want to go write press releases about shoes. I want what I do to be the shoe. Not that I knew what that meant. Kind of miraculously, I found a business that fit the bill exactly. A college friend of mine recruited me. There was this tiny little startup company in Boston in the year 2000 that was going to put compliance training online. And it was kind of the dawn of a lot of things. It was the dawn of the internet. Everybody was putting things online. You had pet food online and grocery delivery online and buy your movie tickets online. But also compliance as an industry was really just getting stood up. Most big companies at the time didn't really have a compliance program yet. They knew that they should because of various kind of regulations and court decisions that had happened. Most of the times people only had compliance programs if they had done something wrong and were carrying out a settlement with the Department of Justice or similar federal agencies. But the long and the short of it is, I joined a company that was creating online training for people at big companies, big global companies, where you have to speak 17 languages to people in 40 countries and explain to them when they don't care really at all about what you care about, explain to them how ethical and legal risk shows up in their jobs. And so we wrote courses about why there's a code of conduct or how to look out for bribery when bribery isn't that obvious, or how insider trading isn't just, these, big headline grabbing cases, but you knowing about something and telling your grandma that the stock is going to drop and so she better sell, that kind of thing. And I really fell in love with it. I'm 25 years in the business right now, and it's a fascinating business that I think is doing a lot of good in the world. Our business exists to support people inside these companies who are trying to keep the entire organization on track legally and ethically. And that is not a small job. And I really do think that positive good has been made in the world as a result of it. So that's kind of the background of me, how I got to the industry and the industry itself. And then Rethink started because I joined this little startup. I loved this field. I spent 15 years getting to know kind of everything there is to know about the topics to teach, how people thought about their audience, what our buyers needed. Flash forward to 2013, and I was the head of product strategy. Compliance had become a big industry. And so my business was about $34 million in revenue at the time. And I was the head of product strategy. And clients were starting to get sick of the things we created in the early 2000s because technology had changed, audiences had changed, expectations had changed. And the way that, in the way of big companies, the companies didn't want to change. They had a captive audience. They had these multi-year contracts. They had, blue chip Fortune 500 clients. They thought, we're doing great. So basically, clients told me they wanted something more interesting. I heard them. I created prototypes like, how about compliance whiteboards and how about compliance infographics? And what if we do more media? And what if we make this stuff shorter? And I would go around and show these to clients. And these were all name brand big companies. And 201, they would say, any of these, all of these, just make these. This is what I want to buy. Back at my company, they started saying to me, stop showing these things to clients. They want to buy them. So that was how it started. And the fact of the matter is, I'd always been interested in business. I'd always been interested in entrepreneurship. And I watched my former company owners get a company up from scratch. When I joined, they had no clients. And when I left, it was a $34 million business with 300 clients, right? So it was an amazing ride that I got to see. I had never thought about founding a company myself, but it was so crystal clear. It wasn't just like this vague intuition, like maybe people want slightly better training. I literally sat in rooms with people who were desperate for something new, and I couldn't think of doing anything else. So although it seemed impossible because there were these four companies who kind of owned the market, I looked at what they had. I looked at what I could do with my own two hands, and I thought, well, I can never be as big as them, but I can try. And then it turned out that the market was hungrier than I thought. And so anyway, 11 years ago, I founded Rethink, and here we are.
What an amazing journey. And I think what's really interesting about it is that you've stayed in the same industry and field your entire career, which
Yes.
really lends to your expertise. And I find it so interesting. And this is so common in large companies where they don't want to pivot, they don't want to change. And for you to have the confidence and gumption to be like, they're asking for it, it doesn't exist, I'm going to go create it, is something beautiful. What was your biggest hesitation or your biggest thing to overcome when you were in the process of developing Rethink? Like thinking about leaving that secure job and building something on your own. What were the biggest scarcity mindset moments, I guess, that came to you?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is actually even believing that it's possible. And I see this all the time now, because in my industry now, multiple times, there have been people who I've known as a client. There have been people who I knew as the head of an industry association. There have been people I knew who I was selling to, right? And friendly network contacts with, or whatever. And this has happened like, I don't know, half a dozen times. And you watch them leave a full-time job, hang out a shingle, and then the next time they talk to you, their face looks entirely different because they get hit with the same bus that I got hit with, which is like, oh my God, nothing is going to happen on its own. Everything that happens will have to depend on me. And it's a very humbling experience. And I'll say that the average person looking at you doing it does not assume you're going to succeed. And in my case, I wasn't even I was the head of product strategy. That's not low level, but I wasn't in senior management at my last company. And I frankly wasn't perceived by people as being a business leader in any way, a business strategist, anybody who knew about money. So yeah, so it's believing that you can do it. And I'm happy to tell the story of because it's a great story that I set out to do it. I also tried to do about 5 other things and Rethink kept winning. But it is a fascinating journey to do something, to have that stark moment of, oh my God, no one's going to do this except me. But then to see it pay off. And once you hang out a shingle and try stuff and it pays off and you start getting clients and you start delivering projects and you see that there's traction, it's also incredibly motivating and inspiring because it carries its own momentum. So I guess I answered 2 versions of your question.
Was there a point in time, Kirsten, as you were building Rethink and all of those other projects that you started and left for Rethink, that you had your points of doubt to where you considered going back to work for someone else?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. I absolutely never had a point of doubt. And I look back now at the PowerPoints I made and at the emails I sent, and I think, how on earth did I have so much confidence this was going to work? And in fact, the opposite there, I'm going to tell you a moment where I should have doubted and I didn't doubt at all. And I'll tell you what happened. So I left my business, my previous role in March of 2015, and I opened Rethink in July 1 of 2015. My previous business forced me to take a consulting contract double my rate in half the time. So that actually paid me right out of the gate. And if I had only been interested in money, I would have just done that because they hired me at 20 hours for double my previous rate, and then they bumped it up to 40. So that actually funded the takeoff of Rethink, which was amazing. And I actually had them hire Rethink, and they knew what I was doing. So that was Rethink's earliest revenue. And then a cybersecurity company was trying to get off the ground, and they hired me to do product strategy and make the products. That was an amazing laboratory because I had this concept that you could outsource the creation of courses versus have a big room of developers, which I had. And their money let me prove that out. So it was a way to kind of test it before I needed to test it or pay for it, which was great. And then I had another like communications consulting contract. But what was funny is I did all four of those jobs at the same time. And then I stopped doing the one that was the weakest. And so first I peeled off the communications company because that wasn't working. And then the cybersecurity company wasn't taking off. So I peeled off that one. And then I finally was getting enough business at Rethink that I ended my very lucrative consulting contract with my previous employer. And I said to them, I'm going to start competing with you, so I can't work for you anymore. But what's interesting is, to get to the point where I answer your question, is I cut off from them 1 year in July of 2016. And I was like, I'm going all in on Rethink. And I did a webinar for an industry association that got us clients. I got a booth at an industry association, like whatever. And I had some business lined up for Q4 that was, I'd had some savings from my consulting, and I had a job lined up for Q4 of 2016 that I was like, okay, this is going to see us through the year. And then all the sales and marketing work that we're putting in will pay off in 2017. All of those jobs fell apart in 2016. In one case, a client I knew didn't call me back. It turned out she and like 40% of her company had been laid off. Anyway, I had no revenue in 2016. And I didn't doubt for a second. I really felt like, I know the market needs this. I just need to get in front of people to say that. It sucks that I don't have any money coming in the door right now, but we got to figure that out. And I actually teamed up with a woman who was our head of marketing at the time. And we set up a whole kind of thought leadership marketing thing on LinkedIn, where we would write blogs and then cross-post them to LinkedIn. And that, plus the other marketing we were doing, created a growth year in 2017. So I should have lost my nerve. I don't know why I didn't, except I was right. So that's how it worked.
Whew, that's awesome. And it gave me a little bit of palpitations just listening to you. We all get to that point in time where we're like at a crossroads, and either we bulldoze through it or we turn around. You bulldoze through it. So at 2015, you start the company. 2016, you have to realign. At which point did you make the decision to be like, I'm not going to do this by myself. I'm going to start bringing people to help me?
Yeah, great question. I actually opened my doors with 2 people available as freelance. We opened our doors doing codes of conduct. I was under a non-compete for training, so I couldn't do compliance training right out of the gate. But I thought, okay, we'll be the intersection of where deep compliance expertise meets like really skillful global communications, and anything that falls into that bucket we'll do. And codes of conduct were something other companies were trying not to do, and they were like, they were well-paid consulting engagements, I guess I'll put it that way. And so we were doing a bunch of those. But I actually opened the door with a lawyer who still works at our business today, now full-time, a lawyer and a graphic designer. So in that way, I did have people alongside me from the very beginning. And throughout 2016, I picked up a couple more freelancers. I had a woman, and all my earliest employees were all non-traditional job candidates. And it was a total win-win situation. The first 2 women who worked with me, the lawyer, the graphic designer, they were both coming back from having small children at home. So one had 4 kids, one had 3 kids, and the youngest was 2. And the smoke had cleared enough that they were ready to start working again. And they and some of the other people who followed, who were moms or athletes or writers, they were people who were open to non-traditional schedules, were open to getting paid when I got paid, were open to project work, because on the flip side, it was well compensated and it was at a high performance level. Do you know what I'm saying? It wasn't make work stuff. It was like truly high level professional work at the title and level they wanted and at the pay they wanted. I just couldn't guarantee that it was going to be salaried, right? When I got the check, they would get paid. So to a degree, I always had people with me. We had an enormous growth year in 2017. And I initially first started trying to grow the way that there were a lot of courses online at the time about online businesses and how to grow them. And they were all about VAs and that kind of thing. I initially tried to grow through low-level people, cheap, low-level people. And it was a nightmare. I couldn't manage 20 low-level people. It was crazy. And so Patty, who who's one of my business partners today and invaluable, she's kind of like the life force of the company, essentially. She joined me as a partner in 2017. And that made me realize I actually need to build a management team next. I need to build a management team who does the hands-on work, and then they need to build their departments as they grow. It was a totally non-traditional way of doing things. And I was fortunate to find 4 people who were C-suite material who would do the hands-on work first and then build departments. But that was how it went. And so essentially 2017 was a growth year. 2018, I added a number of people kind of at the management team level, and then we built out their teams in the subsequent years.
I love that you had such a non-traditional approach to your growth. Most of the time, people hire the lower level and try to build them up into leadership, which is a challenge in itself. So building the opposite direction, how do you think that scaled your growth more effectively and efficiently?
Oh, it scaled my growth in a way I couldn't have done myself. And I'll say that the thing that gave me the idea, I was reading a ton of books about how to be a CEO, and I really felt like I was running flat out trying to develop myself to be the leader of the business. And it was like, if you teach a class for the first time, you're like a book ahead of your students. And it was kind of the same thing. Like I was a book ahead of what the company, or maybe a book behind, but nobody knew yet. But like I was trying to learn what I needed to learn to be the leader that the company needed. And the book that I read is called The Founder's Dilemma. There's a Harvard Business Review article that summarizes it. But the Founder's Dilemma is people in California interviewed I think it was 3,000 startup businesses and 9,000 founders or something like that. And there's a lot of information in the book, but they basically found that there were these decision points that you make that you sometimes don't even know you're making because you just assume there's only one path. And the really critical decision point it told me about is there's essentially a part where you decide, I either want to be rich or I want to be king. That's the term they use. I prefer growth, scale, impact, not rich, but you can grow or you can be king. And if you want to be king, everybody knows these people, everything goes through you, right? You hire no co-founders or weak co-founders. You don't share equity. You don't pay particularly well. You have a bunch of underlings and they all report up to you and everything needs your review. I'm saying it in kind of a negative way. There are people who excel at that and do a good job, but essentially your growth is limited because you're the smartest person in the room, and it's bigger than what you could accomplish alone, but it has an upper limit, and that upper limit is you and your capacity. The flip side of it is you hire strong co-founders. You look for the smartest people in the room. You share equity, you share decision-making power. You let them own things. You let them be smarter than you. I mean, you still do need to be someone they are happy to work with. So you need to set the vision and kind of run the company. But I read that book and realized that was what I needed to do. Luckily, I found the people to do it. And luckily, they were willing to join a pretty fledgling company at the economic terms I could offer and really do the hands-on work before hiring it. And we could talk probably for an hour about why that moment in time made those people available. But I was very lucky that was how it worked out.
I love that you summarized that book succinctly and passionately, because it really speaks for a person who's attempting to grow their business or is thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, of how to structure and maintaining full control. And that's a valid path as long as you surround yourself with a bunch of, I wanted to say advisors, but that's not what I'm trying, like a personal board of directors that can help you guide that. You can retain control of your business, but at least seek out those outside opinions so that you are not developing in a way that is not healthy for your company and for your team. And then I thoroughly believe that growth happens through partnership and collaboration. And the more people are hands-on, the better it is, because you have your mastermind built in. So looking back, you're now 11 years in. I'm trying to do
Yeah.
mental math. You're now 11 years in. What have been your biggest inflection point to where you have had to pivot in a major way because either the market told you to or your team told you to?
Those are great questions. I'll share the very first inflection point, and then there's probably at least two more. The very first inflection point was February of 2018. So started in 2015, business started flowing our way. Up until February of 2018, all our growth happened from people contacting us. But I'd been in the field a long time. Patty had been in the field a long time. We had personal networks. We had people who knew that we did stuff. There was great word of mouth. We published and spoke a lot. In February of 2018, Patty and I decided to start doing I'll call it a soft version of outbound sales. We would do what we called city trips. So we'd basically say, who do we know? And the first place we picked was Detroit and Cleveland, because you could drive between the two. We called up everybody we knew, both previous clients and then network contacts. And we said, hey, we're going to be in town. And we'd love to fit you in. We'd love to share what we're doing. And we had this whole kind of post Me Too anti-harassment package. And so we had a digital code and so we were like, let us show you a couple of really exciting things we're working on. We'd love to hear what you're hearing. We'll share trends. And we went out and did these city trips. We did those all the way up until COVID, and they were they were really helpful on the sales front and just on kind of building our networks and having people think of us. But the very first trip we did, we got into like 10 places, and they were major companies. I won't say any names, but if you think about kind of the Detroit and Ohio corridor, these are big brand name companies working in well-known industries. And we went to 10 companies who between them worked with our three biggest competitors. And up until then, I really thought we were going to be an add-on, that every company in the space would have a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract or a 6-year contract with one of the 3-4 big companies in the space. And then they'd come to us for special projects. And because I thought there's no way we can touch them. We'll just be 1% to 2% of the market, but that's plenty of money. We're going to there's plenty of business. And then we went to those places and every single person we talked to complained about the companies and complained and complained. And we would try and be sympathetic. We would say, listen, we get it. We used to work inside those big companies. They're working with outdated technology. That's why it's clunky. And the people would say clunky is an understatement. And they were just 201. They despised working with the competitors. And it also made me realize that things that had been table stakes in the early days of the industry, service levels and in-house advisory expertise and customization entitlements and things like that, all of them had moved back for their own business model reasons. And it suddenly, Patty and I drove from Detroit to Ohio kind of in a state of shock. And we said, oh my God, we didn't realize it, but the whole market's up for grabs. We're not just collecting the special projects when people want to like make an extra impact. If we make a library and if we do this right, the whole industry's up for grabs. And so that was one inflection point. And we introduced a library in the summer of 2019. Second inflection point was COVID. And we were lucky we had the 2018 inflection point and introduced a library in 2019. Because in 2020, when COVID hit, everything that was not training fell off a cliff. Everything that had been, $1 million line of business before, codes, policies, advisory, everybody looked at their kind of plate and they were like, that can wait. And they pushed every one of those projects off. But training has to happen every year. You have to talk to your employees about this stuff. Like you just have to slot it in. So our business grew 28% the year of COVID, but it grew even more than that because the majority of it was training and everything else we had done had fallen off a cliff. So that was a second inflection point. 21, 22 were just huge growth years for training. And then the last couple of years have been about getting really serious about refining our business and really thinking intentionally about all the back end stuff. How can we sell to clients in a way that's mutually beneficial for both of us? Multi-year contracts for us, but entitlements that clients actually want, and then all the accounting stuff. How should we classify our revenue? All that kind of thing. So it's kind of been a business maturity journey the last couple of years.
That show road needs to come back.
I know. It's probably time to do it again.
Right. Like I am finding today that more and more people want that human connection again, now that we're all over COVID. But I would say that the reality is that you guys, you could have gone in and said, yeah, we're still never going to touch that. Right.
I guess
and you
so.
didn't.
Yeah.
You saw it as an opportunity and you said, well, why not? Why not us?
We did say, why not us? That's one of our company values, which you might know, but one of our company values is, so our company values have like a statement and then a follow-up, like own it, everybody sweeps the floor. But one of them is be bold, why not us? So anyway, sorry not to talk over you, but
No, it was perfect. I'm like, I didn't even know I was using your company language.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's some kind of foresight here that maybe other business owners might not see as an opportunity. And if someone was at a similar inflection point, how would you guide them to evaluate which way is the best path to go?
That is such a good question. Before I ask them questions to help guide the path, one mindset I like to encourage in people, and we say this phrase a lot inside the businesses, and I learned it from Ramit Sethi, who learned it from Marie Forleo. I just want people to know I didn't invent it myself, but everything is figure outable. And what's so fascinating about growing a business like this is I didn't arrive on July 1, 2015 with all this knowledge fully formed. Like, I know how to classify my revenue. I know how to set up a finance function. I know how to think about equity in the business. I know how to hire. I know how to run a world-class sales team. I didn't know that stuff. But it's all learnable, and that information is out there, and you can hire people like the people sitting right in front of me to help you with really important parts of the business, including sales enablement, right? And sales and marketing and how they work together and everything. And I think sometimes people assume because they don't know something now, they shouldn't try it. Whereas I feel like if you have product market fit, if you have something you know your market wants, that creates a momentum of itself and you can figure everything else out. So to flash back to 2018, realizing the whole market was up for grabs, here's what we didn't know how to do. Translations at scale. What technology were we going to use to do this, right? Like when you're doing independent one-off things for clients, that's very different than a giant library that hundreds of clients use and roll out to millions of employees across the world. But there are people who know how to do it and people who know how to know every piece of it. And I didn't get everything right, but we're still standing. So I guess that's what I would say is don't be afraid to aim high and learn what you need to.
That is such an important and valuable lesson because as women, especially, we have a tendency to be a little bit more into our perfectionism. And so it's kind of like there are these roadblocks that show up and these hurdles when we don't know how to do something, we just freeze.
Yeah.
I'm like more of the school of fake it till you make it. As long as you put in the homework behind it to learn and master what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Because once you fake it till you make it for too long, it catches up to you. But that was a really good lesson. We've talked a lot about the past and the story. Now I'm going to talk about present and future. So if you teletransport yourself 5 years from today, what's the vision for Rethink?
Yeah, the vision for Rethink is simple, which is compliance officers have a really hard job to do that's changing all the time. And they need a partner and they need effective tools to do what they need to do really well and keep responding to changes. Organizations change, economic conditions change, audiences change, media preferences change, right? And I think we are the best in the business at creating compliance communications that really reach people. When companies switch to us and roll things out, people get unsolicited compliments. If they're getting unsolicited compliments, people noticed it, which matters. So my vision is really simple. It's to have a bigger impact than we do today. If we believe in what we do, and we think we're the best in the business, which we do, it's to do it for more and more and more people.
So, and how do you adapt? Because there is something that we see, especially in like just ethics and behaviors of today's society, and the fact that we are, I don't know, like at some point in time I feel like they were a little bit more rigid, and now we're getting on the looser side of things, and so I'm curious how you adapt as a smaller company to the needs of an ever-changing market.
Yeah. What's nice about the field of compliance is that really smart people did a very good job to articulate what our profession does. And it stays away from the squishy side of ethics, right? And it talks more in very practical terms. The people who started and created this field really needed to think about, you don't want to just send people out with abstract, do the right thing any more than if you were in charge of safety at a plant, you'd kind of toss someone a hard hat and be like, be careful out there, right? It's like you need to say to them, look, you're working with this machine. This machine has this danger. It has a guard. If you move this guard, something could go wrong. And so similarly, it's keeping compliance really practical and actionable. The really fascinating thing has been, they say like what's old is new again. In the 25 years I've been doing this, a lot has changed. Laws change, enforcement patterns change, governments change, sentiments change. But the fact of the matter is, there are still laws that people can get wrong, and also it's not only about defending against enforcement. We've been doing this long enough that people are realizing. So, for instance, bribery is illegal, and it's an area that has been incredibly enforced a lot, right? So people have learned, and so they've done a lot of bribery training, and they've thought about this stuff. The current administration has changed their enforcement priorities. They've said, we don't care as much about going after bribery as we care about going after fraud. That's their, prerogative. But that made companies really have to sit back and say to themselves, well, if we're not using kind of this stick of enforcement, why are we doing this anyway? And what they realized is, we don't want to bribe in business. We don't want 27-year-olds running around Eastern Europe with briefcases of cash. That's not how we want to earn business. Like it's good for us to send the message that we want to win business on our merits. We want to live in a society where companies compete fairly. So I don't know. I just say that to say a lot changes, but a lot stays the same.
We talked a little bit about the initial growth of your company, but I'm curious, where is the size of your team today? And as you grow over the next 5 years, do you see the team expanding?
Yeah, our team right now is about 30 people. That's actually not the biggest it's been. The biggest was about 44, 45 people. And actually, with changes in technology and actually changes in our business model, we didn't need all that many people, meaning with all those changes, we're able to run a little bit more efficiently than we did in the past. So 30 people today. What's really interesting is with the maturity of our library, and we initially, our kind of sweet spot was serving big enterprise companies, kind of like the biggest enterprises out there, who it's a little bit more of a professional services engagement. They're buying training from you, but there's a lot of service that goes along with it. In the last couple of years, we've always served companies of all sizes, but we've kind of developed a bigger concentration of kind of the SMB clients, and they need less. And we also introduced an all access subscription to our library that's been really popular because it lets clients trade off kind of like cost with access to training. It's very low cost it's very cost effective, I guess is a good way to say it. And then speed versus time, right? And so clients who have access to our whole library can move really fast. So I don't know. I just say that to say our volume of projects has gone up today over where it was when we were kind of 50% bigger as a company size. So I'm answering your question in kind of an abstract way, except to say we have about 30 people right now. We run lean, but not hot. We're not super at capacity. And I think as we grow with access to the library, with all access subscriptions, our team doesn't need to grow exponentially as revenue does, right? I think it will grow as revenue does, but the team isn't kind of the limiting factor of growth.
I do want to put in a plug for you because I think that Rethink and your team does an excellent job at educating people on compliance training and on your offering. And I want you to share with our audience about your webinars and your demos and all of the really cool thing. And just as an FYI to everybody, I attended the webinars that Rethink puts together, and I got to see Kirsten speak in fluent Korean, and that was absolutely amazing. And I would love for us to also touch on the AI and see how that's influenced your business. But yeah, like to tell everybody about your educational endeavors.
Yeah, I will. And I'll say as a background that when I was first figuring out how to get the business off the ground, I read a book called Managing the Professional Services Organization. Because again, even though we're not a professional services company, we sell a product and that product is compliance training. Our buyer buys like a professional services person. And in that book, the guy said it is 10,000 times more valuable to demonstrate your competence than it is to assert it. So don't spend your time making brochures. Talk, write. Don't attach a brochure, attach an article that you wrote. So from the very early days of the business, we blogged, we spoke at industry conferences, that kind of thing. Our first webinar, which I think we tried in whatever year GDPR came out, 2018, 2019, we had 4 people sign up and none showed up, but we did the webinar anyway. And then we sent the recording to people being like, sorry, you missed us. But our webinars really got off the ground in May of 2020 because everybody was home, nobody was traveling, our city visits were grounded, we weren't going to conferences, and we thought, how are we going to get in front of people? And so we scheduled a webinar and we thought, we hope 10 people show up, and 117 people showed up. And so since that day, we've done mostly monthly webinars. We soon after that initial thing, we went out and got credit for them because people in my industry need to maintain a CCEP and they need CEUs. So we got certified for that. But these days we have between 300 and 500 people a month who sign up for our webinars. Many people come again and again. And then in our work with you, we talked about adding on additional non-credit things. We moved it to 3 a month. We're actually condensing it, but we're having 100, 160 people come to our non-credit things when we're just showing our stuff. You know, the point of the webinars is real thought leadership, and we have guests, and we, really put a lot of work into it. The others are, let us walk you through our privacy suite. Let's show you our code of conduct. Let's take a look through our code of conduct white paper. And we're amazed at how many people show up. But to your point, it's an area where a lot changes. And so people need to keep up on what's going on. And we kind of try to lead the industry conversation where we can.
We've gone to the past. We've reflected a little bit on the future. What would you say that you are most proud of today and what you have created?
I'll say what I'm proud of, but it's not, I'm going to start with what, not the main thing, and then I'll go to the main thing. Of course, I'm proud that I've created an alternative for compliance people, because before Rethink existed, there were 4 complacent vendors who weren't moving forward. And I love that we have been a thorn in their side, right? We have pushed them to embrace innovation simply by competing with them. We have pushed them to be more generous with clients, to think about whether or not they take away service, to think about whether or not they maintain in-house expert teams. So I'm super proud of that. But I honestly think what I'm most proud of has to do with the company and the culture. I like working at a company that values people as people. I like working at a company where you understand that it's people who you're talking to, right? And so if there's gossip, if there's politics, that's a person that you're talking about. And, no place is perfect. We're all humans. No culture is perfect, but we have a very friendly, very human culture. We celebrate people's birthdays on our company chat. People share photos from all over. I one time, because we were talking about AI, we use the kind of Gmail system, so G Suite, G Chat, everything. When Gemini was built into it, one day I asked Gemini in my chat, because I have like individual chats with people, and then we have team chats and client-based chats and that kind of thing. I asked Gemini, what is the tone of chats across the company over the last month? And I loved the answer, because it was like, people are helpful and enthusiastic. They praise one another's work. And it went on in a way that aligns with how I think about the company. And I'll say one other thing, which is to say, we're a woman-owned company. We're about 62, 63% women. we hire the best candidate, period. Our men are awesome. And something I hadn't really thought about, but that I've been told about is, as I say, a lot of our early candidates were moms, and they were moms who were coming back into the workforce. And today, a lot of our people are moms. And I guess I had not realized how much mothers can be discounted in professions until people talked about the difference between their previous companies and mine. And it was really brought home to me. There was a woman who told me that she was out with a group of her friends. They're all women in their 40s. They all have kids. And there was a woman who was talking about, she worked at a consulting company like Deloitte or something like that. And she and her husband started at that consulting company at the same time. They obviously have the same children because they're parents together. And her husband had gotten a promotion that she hadn't gotten. And she said, I know it's because I'm a mom, because I know my work isn't as good as his. I know I work as hard as his. And then the women at the table all started talking about that and talking about how they were overlooked and they were discounted and they were whatever. And then someone turned to this woman and said, but it's probably not like that at your business, is it? And she said, it's not. And she said, I have two kids, they're teenagers. They get off the bus. No one has ever not invited me to a meeting because I'm a mom. No one has ever thought I couldn't handle a project because I'm a mom. No one has ever questioned my competence because I happen to have these children. And I was really kind of touched and kind of dumbstruck when she recounted that conversation to me, because it would never occur to me to assume that about somebody. But it was really fascinating to hear that I guess we can be a difference in the world in that way.
Huge difference. And I wanted to say that, what is it that you think keeps your culture healthy and alive? Because so many people, I would say culture is the hardest thing to create. But once you've created it, how do you sustain it?
Yeah. I think we have a couple of things going for us. Many of us, including the entire C-suite and VP management team, we go back 20 years. We clearly work together still because we like each other. We didn't have to hire any of those people, right? This isn't the kind of company where you have a lot of bodies and you can hide out. So everybody who was chosen because we respect them and we respect their work. And it is a culture where everybody works hard, which I think helps with culture. Because sometimes where culture bogs down is where there are different standards, someone's not carrying their weight, that kind of thing. So I think it helps that a lot of us go back 20 years. I think it helps that our fifth value, which was, we used to have 4 values, but we kept adding the fifth and saying, well, our unspoken fifth value, and we finally were like, we're just going to add it, but is no BS, tell it like it is. And people will say, in the spirit of no BS. And look, again, we're humans. People aren't perfect. Have I gotten in a fight with people in the business that lasted for a while? Sure. And have we had strong feelings and not been on the same side? And even I've wondered if we could make up. That happens, right? Especially when you're doing something high pressure that matters to both of you. But I think people tell the truth and are more likely to speak up than not, because I think they believe that they'll be listened to. Something we're working on a lot this year in the business too is, number one, learning to be aligned. How do I know that I'm taking direction that's in line with what my manager expects, the business expects, my team expects? How do we make sure we're all on the same page? But number two, if I'm unhappy about something, take it to the person themselves, right? And many human groups have tried to, right, we all have to be reminded of that. It's a lot easier to bitch to bitch about somebody than to go to them and say, hey, I don't like what you said, or I don't think you're going in the right direction on this. But I think because we have longstanding relationships, the relationships can withstand conflict. I think we're a team that would rather hear the truth than just be told everything is fine. And I think we're a team that all works really hard together. So I think all those things help with the culture.
And I think in a certain way, having gotten to know you and your team, over the past year, you are overachievers and you're looking forward in the same direction. And that transparency, that in the spirit of no BS, that there are many business owners who avoid expressing themselves and their feelings and being too transparent because they don't want to hurt feelings. But at the end of the day, if you are in partnership with your team, Christy and I have had it a few times, right? In the spirit of transparency. But I think it's healthy because it allows you to realign and look forward and reinvent if needed. They're both the relationship and the direction.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you just said. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that comment.
Of course. As we're wrapping up, there's something that you said while you were talking about your story that is kind of milling around in my head. Why Boston?
Oh, why Boston? So I have a practical answer and a woo-woo answer, and I'll say both. In 1998, I came to Boston for a friend's wedding, and I was so taken with the city. I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago. I went to school in Minnesota, a little liberal arts school out on the plains, and I started my journalism career in Minnesota. And I love the history and the culture that's in Boston. And it shows up in so many ways. It shows up in the architecture, the museums, all the colleges. If you go to, and I'm pointing because it's this way, if you go to the Boston Common and the Public Garden is this beautiful space with trees and a swan lake that has swan boats on it. All the trees have a little placard with the English and the Latin name of the tree. And that's like the way Boston thinks, like, of course you want to know what tree this is. And of course we've planned a garden that features trees from all over the world. And you'd like to walk around and know what they are. So I'm a thinker, if you can't tell from the conversation that we've had, and Boston is just kind of a cultural fit for me. So that's it. On the woo-woo side, somebody told me about astrocartography. Have you ever done this? You go to astro.com and you put in your birth date, and it shows you like where your Venus line is, and that's where you go to fall in love, and where your sun line is. Most of my lines are in the ocean. So most of my lines won't be achieved on Earth. I have to get on a boat somewhere and go intersect with it. But I lived in Boston for 9 years. I lived in Denver for 16, and now I'm back in Boston. Two funny things. My Saturn line goes through Denver. That's where you go to learn lessons and work hard. My Jupiter line, which is luck and innovation and expanding things, is in Boston. So what's funny is I've moved to Boston twice, and I started my business in Denver. So I think I went to Denver, put my head down, learned all my lessons, and now I'm in Boston so Jupiter can expand my luck and fortune.
Well, I love that you're following your chart. As we both have chatted before, it sounds like you're very well aligned with the design of who you are and following those nuggets of information, which for those of you that may not be woo, there's a lot of value in it. I mean, Kirsten is a direct result of showing that, hey, I was in Denver because I had to put my head down and work, and now I'm back to prosperity and luck. So what a cool journey. Kirsten, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You speak so clearly and passionately about the work that you do, and it comes through not only in you, but in your team and in the results that you guys create for organizations. So thank you for taking some time to share your wisdom, knowledge, your growth experience with us and our audience. And we like to ask if there's one piece of advice that you would give anyone that's listening to this that you feel like has been something that you've always gone back to, what would it be?
One piece of advice. Let me think. I think it's probably along the lines of what I said before about everything being learnable, but that I think it's just that more is achievable than possible. Steve Jobs has that great commencement speech where he talks about everything you see around you, this computer, this house, it was built by somebody no smarter than you. Building this company has really taught me that more is possible and more is accessible than I ever thought in my life. So it's been an enormous lesson that way. And something I'd say to people is, I don't know, if you think of something you can do, you can probably do it.
My motto for this year is if boys can do it, so can I.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's true.
Nice.
It's totally true. All right, ladies, it has been an absolute pleasure to see both of you. And to all of you listening out there, stay badass. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Cristy and Aggie.